Hi, my name is Jim Richards. I am CEO of Milkadamia, and this is another episode of Awesome Vegans.
Hello everybody, great to be here with you. We are going to delve right into it because maybe you've had almond milk, maybe you've had soy milk, maybe you've had rice milk, maybe even cashew milk, but there's a new player in town. Jim is CEO of Milkadamia, which I have tried.
Good.
And it is so rich and creamy, just like macadamia nuts. You know how rich macadamia nuts are. So tell me about how you make Milkadamia, because I'm so curious. Everyone's always saying, "Ooh, it takes so much water, etc." How do you make macadamia nut milk?
Okay, so we started as farmers. So our we're not a beverage company who decided to make a milk. We are farmers who grew a beautiful product and a really healthy product. But macadamias are so delicious. Their health qualities are unheard of, and everyone only knows they taste great, you know. So our farmer, who spent an awful lot of effort growing beautiful product, doing it as naturally as possible, he became frustrated that when we sold the macadamias, they were mostly wrapped in chocolate and sold as candy. And
I've had those.
Yeah, they taste great.
Yes,
you know?
they're super delicious.
That's also almost one of macadamia's biggest problems. They're just so delicious. But they're also really, really healthy. We would say the most healthy of all the nuts in one certain aspect, yeah.
I've never heard of that before.
Exactly. That's why we did the macadamia milk, yeah. Macadamias are extremely anti-inflammatory, and their really natural anti-inflammatory power persists all the way through the intestinal tract, which virtually nothing does, because it's a chemistry experiment down there, you know, and things get broken up. But macadamias have the perfect balance of omega-3 and omega-6. It's a 1-to-1 ratio, exactly what we need, especially in the Western diet. And this highly anti-inflammatory activity produces really good results and looks after our gut, which we know we need to do. Yes. So, of course, you haven't heard of this. It's hidden behind the fact that they're so delicious and that they're mostly presented roasted and salted or wrapped in chocolate, you know, as a twice a year occasional indulgent treat. That's how we've all looked at macadamias.
Well, yes, because when you make a milk out of them, I sort of think like, oh my gosh, where's all that rest of the goodness gone?
Oh, no, it's all there. It's the whole macadamia is in there. We don't.
Oh, really?
You know, we don't take any part out. So what we do is we grow macadamias. We take them out of their shell, which is a task in itself, a very tough shell. We then grind them to a super fine paste. It's nut that you can pour. Macadamias, fortunately, are 80% oil, and it's the oil that is so good in macadamias. So once we've ground it, we had to manufacture our own machine to be able to grind macadamias without cooking them, because we wanted them to stay raw. Oh. And so Milkadamia is made from raw macadamias.
Oh, huge selling point, I would think.
Well, it is, and that's a good thing. But we actually ended up at that point because we were trying to get the right taste, and every time we roasted them, it raised the taste hurdle. You know, our goal is to get people from dairy to non-dairy, and when that is your goal, you've got to produce something that doesn't have a giant taste barrier.
Mm-hmm, sure, of course.
And so raw macadamias turned out to taste much closer to dairy than roasted macadamias do.
Okay.
And you know, raw, if you're not denaturing the oils through roasting them, and you're not cooking the nut, it causes a few things to happen. One is you have to choose really good product to go in there. You can't be throwing your seconds in there. You can if you're going to roast them, because you can hide a lot of taste behind roasting. But if you're going to use raw, you have no choice. That product is going to taste. There's nowhere to hide the taste. Mm-hmm. So we have to use good product. That was the first step. But we thought it was worth it because then you know you're making a great product. But more, we set ourselves to be a portal product, you know. So there's many more people drinking dairy than non-dairy, and it seems a bit counterproductive at this point for non-dairy to be scrapping amongst themselves. You know, really.
Yes.
If we're going to do the world a favour, it's shifting people from dairy to non-dairy, any non-dairy, really. But one of the barriers is taste. A lot of people find it's difficult to shift from one to the other if you're used to dairy. And I did that when I first moved to soy. I had really had to discipline myself to keep drinking it, and it took me several months before I actually came to enjoy soy.
But when did you make that switch?
25, 30 years ago. That was a long time ago.
I think the taste hurdle has really changed over the decades, for sure. Because when you were drinking it, they probably didn't have plant-based creamers, which you guys have, and it's so good. And then all the other versions. I mean, now I drink soy milk. It's until I met Milkadamia, it was my milk of preference, and I couldn't go to milk. I couldn't make the other switch. I'm talking about just pure taste.
Yeah, that's what happens. Our taste buds are not set in stone.
Right.
We educate them. I remember the first time I tried tofu, I thought it was just the most awful thing.
I live on tofu.
And so do I now. But when I first tasted it, I couldn't believe that a culture had developed consuming that stuff. We educate our taste. And, back then I was educating my taste for my own health, for nutrient, So looking for better for me products and more interesting products, so that was what I was doing, educating my taste buds. I think now we have another motivation, and that is that we need to look after more than just ourselves. Everything's joined together. However, I'll get back to how we make.
Yes, because I want to hear, because it's going to be linked to thinking about more than just ourselves. We're thinking about the planet as well, and I think Milkadamia has a nice footprint. But I want to talk about that. How do you make it in terms of water? I'm really interested in the resources that you use.
Okay, so we have our own farm. We now source wider than our own farm, but initially it was just our farm. And on our farm, there is no irrigation. Macadamia trees are a native Australian rainforest tree, and our farm is right beside the rainforest where macadamias come from. In fact, it's an old dairy farm. They came in, cut down all the trees, and put dairy farm there, and so now we're putting trees back, which is kind of a cool thing to do.
Oh my gosh, because we talk so much about how do we shift farms from meat and dairy to mushroom, macadamia nut, so the farmers continue to have work. And then of course when you do that kind of regenerative farming, which we'll talk about in a little bit, you have the opportunity to replant trees, and then we're talking about helping the planet again. So you took over an old dairy farm. Love that. And
we still continue to plant thousands, tens of thousands actually of macadamia trees, and so we're recoating those hills that were stripped of trees, which is a fun thing to do. But because it's right beside the rainforest, where these trees came into being and developed, and we get the same weather that was always there. It's the same amount of rain, the same amount of sunshine, and so we don't even have an irrigation system. It's just...
That's mind-boggling to me.
People say, how much water does it take to grow a macadamia? We actually don't know. However much fell out of the sky or was drawn up from the dew. I suspect it's no less than any other nut. I don't think it's a arid ground nut. It was always in a rainforest. It always got a lot of rain. So I assume that they take up a fair bit of water.
But it's water that's coming naturally. It's not water that you're diverting to the crops. Okay.
And that's an interesting thing. We always talk about, you hear local food, locally produced food. Well, we think there's another version of that, and that is that the plant itself is in the locale where it should be. It is where it belongs. If you take a great tree and then plant it in arid land, you've got no choice but to be drawing lots and lots of water from somewhere and putting it on to keep them alive. On the side of our pack, when we were still drawing from our own farm, we had on there free-range trees. And we called them free-range trees because they weren't tethered to an irrigation system. But also we said free-range trees, those are trees supporting life, not trees on life support.
Oh, I like it. Great.
We're actually taking it off the packs now because the fact that we have to draw macadamias from wider than our own farm, we can't always guarantee that they're free-range trees, and so you can't continue to make those claims when you can't absolutely support it. although we think most of what we currently use is still from free-range trees, but I'm sure, there could be one or two that aren't. We don't know.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. So basically you're talking about scalability. So as you get larger, you're needing to get macadamia nuts from other places than the Australian Amazon, if I've got this correctly. And so then you're talking about mass producing, and can you keep the same small footprint as you scale up?
We hope so, and we're trying to. So we are looking at the way the climate is moving about. Areas that once got a lot of rain are getting very arid, and vice versa. It's to have a big agricultural business. You really are going to have more than one geographical area you're sourcing from. So a few months ago, we visited South Africa, where they grow macadamias as well, and we went and inspected half a dozen farms there. And the issue that we were really looking at there was water use. Are these farms, how are they using water? Well, we haven't drawn any macadamias from there just yet, but we're going to need to. We're going to need to have widely separated geographical areas to be sure of supply, because either one could have any kind of climatic event. So we've inspected half a dozen farms there, beautiful farms. We went there because macadamias come from Australia with all the arrogance that we know what we're doing, and these guys, we're going to have to teach them something. But when we got there, they really knew what they were doing, and they had the most amazing water conservation efforts already taking place.
In South Africa?
In South Africa, yeah. So we actually came away from there a little humbled, thinking, well,
isn't that nice? Wow.
maybe we do everything we know how to do, but you can always learn. There's always a lot more to learn, and farmers who make a commitment to growing things in a sustainable or regenerative way, they're different folk. Something happens to their heart and their minds, and they become passionate. They really express exactly what we would want people to express about the soil and the earth and what they're doing and how they're contributing to building a better future, rather than just taking. They become passionate about adding back to the soil, about creating something and leaving something behind that's better than they found it. And it's actually a privilege and a thrill to have a role that means you can meet up with these people regularly. Every time I meet them, I'm inspired. I come away more deeply moved by farmers who are willing to step out of the standard pattern, and who are willing to risk their farms really to do something much more positive. And they risk their reputation in the farming area often. They face all sorts of resistance, but once they get going, there's no stopping them. These are amazing human beings. I just love spending time with them.
So let me step back for a second, because I do want to talk about regenerative farming a lot. So you're saying that when you make Milkadamia, it's primarily 80% the whole nut. No, I'm sorry, 80% of the nut is oil.
Yep.
And you don't roast them, and you use the nut in full, and it's just so creamy, it goes right to, with I'm guessing some water and some other things, it goes right to the milk. So it lends itself pretty naturally to a liquid. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Once we've ground it that fine, it's under 200 microns, which is tiny.
Okay.
It's very, very small.
So
it's virtually a liquid at that point.
It's virtually a liquid.
Yeah. And yes,
okay.
we add water. We add a little bit of pea protein to Milkadamia as well, because while macadamias are really wonderful in some areas, they're pretty low in protein. They're not a major protein source. And so, because people expect that
out of a nut,
out of a nut, and in their milk, we add a bit of protein.
Okay.
So,
and I think of a macadamia nut as very high in fat. Would you say yes to that?
Absolutely, the best fat that there is. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I don't know. Do I get to have any good fat even at this point of my
We need it.
Okay.
We need good fat.
Okay.
And
I think everybody else needs good fat. I don't think I personally am allowed to have fat, but okay. No, I'm kidding. Yes, we all need good fat. Okay, but then my next question was, and so that's how you make a pretty simple manufacturing process,
really,
if I can say that.
Yep.
But then Milkadamia specifically seem to have a focus on regenerative farming, and that of course means partnering with regenerative farmers. For those who maybe don't know it's kind of the buzzword these days, but maybe for those who don't know what regenerative farming is, please go ahead and tell us what that is and distinguish it from organic so that people can know the difference.
Okay, the difference between organic and regenerative farming is that organic's focus is no chemicals.
Yes.
Which is a great focus.
Which would be above the soil, primarily.
Yeah. Regenerative get to the same point, but they come via a different route. So regenerative is about looking after the microorganisms and all that subterranean life that actually supports everything that's living above the soil comes from, it's a silent engine of life, what's under there. It's like dark matter. It's a bit of a mystery to us. We actually have named, I think it's less than 1% of the microorganisms under there. Some scientists has got them out and pinned them and labelled them, but most are not. And not only don't we know most of the microbes under there, we certainly don't know what all the interactions are and what happens. But what we do know is that left alone, they are what manufactures topsoil. It is their lives and deaths and all the interactions that they have that creates brand new topsoil. So regenerative farming is looking at a system that works in your area, because regenerative farming isn't one rigid thing. It is really the only measure, if you've been successful as a regenerative farmer, is you take cores of the soil and see if these microbes have created new soil. New soil is,
I see.
That is the success. Anything else, if you're not generating new soil, new topsoil, then you're on the way. Maybe you're on the way to being a regenerative farmer, but you haven't got there yet.
So it takes it a much more commitment from organic, but also, and that there are many more steps, and you're looking at the ground underneath, not just what you spray or don't spray on the plants themselves, but also, and correct me if I'm wrong because I'm just delving into this subject matter, but regenerative farming is also what keeps the land healthy, because now we're starting to have dead zones where we can't grow anything anymore because all the microorganisms have been killed from sprays and chemicals, etc. So it keeps the land and the soil healthy. It also avoids erosion. So when you step in here anytime if I've got this wrong.
Yeah, I will.
If the land isn't healthy and isn't working together and isn't rich and vibrant, it will start to sort of blow away, or if the rain comes, it'll wash away. It won't have roots. It won't stay. It won't hold together. And then you have soil erosion, and that's a whole other problem all in and of itself.
Yes. We've lost something like 50% of the Earth's topsoil already.
Amazing.
And it doesn't come back by itself. Regenerative farming we can save some areas and we can create beautiful layers of new topsoil. Coming back to organic for a minute, regenerative farming, you can't use chemicals or else you're going to kill those microbes and you're not going to achieve the end result. So that we end up in the same place there. I think the best farmers eventually will be organic regenerative. It's both. So I don't think it's a competition between the two. Probably the greatest difference is that organic farms, because they don't use because they don't use spray, they use disking and ploughing to control weeds. So they're constantly breaking up the soil. And for regenerative farming, that's the worst thing you can do. You want to leave the soil alone.
Intact.
Don't plough ever. Don't rip up the soil. Those networks that take time to develop can't be torn apart every year. You can't. You cannot be ripping.
It's a fabric, really. Is that correct?
Sort of, yeah.
Yes, right.
Yeah, and it's a network of tiny little filaments. They say in a tablespoon of healthy topsoil there are billions of microorganisms and miles of these tiny little
fascinating
fibers in there that we're not sure what they do, but we know they pass nutrients backwards and forwards between different underground creatures and plants that they share. A lot of them. There's more and more being learnt about this, and I kind of read everything I can lay my hands on. It is just fascinating what's going on in there, and also fascinating that we, even every aspiration we hold, is dependent on those tiny little things that we don't even know the names of them. You know, they're keeping us going. They're keeping the planet going. So we need to protect them. Anything we can do that's going to help those create new soil is building a future. Everything that we don't, if we're not doing that, we are actually spending the future now. Right. You know, it's and you're right, the structure is really, really important. But beyond that, food that's grown in regenerative new topsoil is more nutrient dense. It's more abundant. Part of the regenerative farming is that you never want to leave the soil bare. So you're always putting on cover crops, and you don't want to do a monocrop really. You want other things planted between. This is all good for the soil. And so the same acreage produces a lot more and a lot more nutrient dense. So just and when you read about people who have taken their farms regenerative, this is not naturally part of regenerative farming, but they always seem to end up at a point where they open up their fields to people to come and just forage. They've had multiple crops, they've had multiple things to sell, and you reach a point where that farm is earned more than it ever earned before, and it can be a bit more labour intense, the collecting of things, rather than just a giant tractor rolling through. But often, when they've taken all that they need, there's enough left that is not really profitable for the farmer to take, but an absolute waste not to give to someone. And
so the community benefits from
often,
regenerative farming.
It comes back to what happens to their heart when they become regenerative farmers. It's not officially part of it, but it happens so often.
I see. So yes, the pride and community and sharing of food and resources becomes sort of a byproduct, if you will, I think you're saying, of regenerative farming. But I want to go back to, obviously, I think we've talked about how this is better for the planet. So you're talking about a soil that's more robust, that won't disintegrate. So obviously something we need, but it produces more nutrient-dense food. So, you know, whether you are eating meat or whether you are vegan or vegetarian, everyone needs to take B12. Now, people who eat meat, they get it in the form of those animals have been injected with B12 because there's not a lot of nutrients in the food that they're getting, those monocrops. So the monocrops being wheat, corn, and soy. And then we too, as vegans and vegetarians, take B12. So, you know, because the land doesn't give it to us anymore. It's all been, we used to get B12 right out of the soil, but you don't get that anymore. So these are the sort of things that that you're talking about, Jim Richards. That you can get for your own body and sustainability when we have regenerative farming. But I want to say regenerative farming is a process.
Yes.
So if you are taking a farm where perhaps you've had a lot of animal agriculture, there's just been an over dumping of waste and chemicals, manure waste, actual physical waste and chemicals, it's going to take time for that land to, many seasons, I think many years, right, to get that land to a point where it can be used to grow crops again, diverse crops. Is that right?
When we stop ploughing, ripping up the soil, those microbes immediately start building their networks.
Incredible.
When we protect the soil, don't leave it exposed to wind and sun, it immediately starts to repair. It does take it takes a few years to get 100%, but after only a couple of years, it's 50% of the way there. You know, so you want. It is not a process that's going to take 7 to 10 years.
Okay, it's not.
It's not, no.
Okay.
And that, you know, the first benefits are there in the first year. So
Okay.
not the full benefits, but the first benefits. And
So you could have something like transition crops.
oh, absolutely, and that is really where most regenerative farms are right now. You know, there's some older ones that are absolutely fully regenerative, and they're producing brand new layers of topsoil. It's not that the farmer produces them; it's those microorganisms that do. We've just got to stop getting in the way. That's what we've been
Yes,
doing.
I know. God, get out of our own way. Don't we
Yes.
know this by now, people? Get out of our own way. Well, okay, so maybe we can transition a little bit to talk about, obviously, as you work towards regenerative farming, dairy farming would be the opposite of that. So when you have so much concentrated manure, et cetera, happening in these plots of land, talk to me about how you see the world moving away from dairy. Let me just give a couple quick statistics. According to Switch for Good and the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, 65% of all Americans are lactose intolerant, much higher in African American communities and Asian communities. There's tremendous waste and suffering of animals, of course, but also waste and damage to the land that has, this monocrop way of farming, be it animals or the corn or the soy or the wheat that we then give to animals, very labor intensive on the land itself and basically slowly killing it away. So we have lots of reasons to move away from dairy. Do you see us doing that?
Look, what I think is achievable is, in the short term at least, is we should stop the expansion of dairy. We stop cutting down forests and expanding dairy. If we could achieve, in Milkadamia, that's one of our goals. We say, what can we realistically be part of that is meaningful to us and beyond us? And if we could stop the expansion of dairy, if we could at least do that, that's the beginning of the end for them,
Mm-hmm.
But it really isn't us. What gives me a great deal of courage and a great deal of hope is that people spontaneously all around the globe are walking away from dairy for their own reasons, with their own set of values are getting them to spontaneously walk away. And
is it primarily health? Lactose intolerance?
No, I don't believe so. I think
Really?
initially, definitely. I think that was the reason initially. Lactose intolerance. I think people conclude that something that came from a plant is probably better for them than something that came from an animal. So there's that health aspect definitely drives a lot. There's just the interest in varieties of spice of life.
Yes. Sorry.
A statistic that blows me away is that there are 20,000 species of edible plants on the planet.
Yum.
90% of our diet is made up with just 20.
Yeah.
And so there's this massive culinary adventure out there in front of us that we can all get involved in. And ever while we just have, meat and 2 veg and drink milk, it's the tiniest amount of what's possible and what's interesting and exciting, So getting out and getting more and more involved in plant-based is one of the things that is driving it. But I think also once you start doing that and you start being interested in the alternatives, I think looking after the planet, what is good for our soils and our planet, what's good for the world that we love, starts to count a lot. And once you start accepting that we're part of what's here, it's not all about us, we are part, a bit of humility comes in, then our role in how we treat the other creatures that live on this planet becomes a factor too. And I think, the big catchphrase is animal welfare. Well, for sure. But when you suddenly realise that you are, with our finances, we have been supporting an industry that is just a really cruel. This is motherhood that they are. It's all based on motherhood. So this mother cow produces a calf because she's been forcibly impregnated.
It's based on breaking motherhood.
That's right, yeah. Then the calf is taken away. If you see the cows bawling and the calves bawling, you know that they miss each other for at least a period. Either we are callous enough to say we could care less, we're going to have milk anyway, or we say, you know what, at this point in Earth's history, we're better than that. And also at this point in Earth's history, can we afford to treat anything in that manner any longer? Can we afford to continue to do that? And I think people stepping away says, how good is that? People are saying we are better than that. And if that's a first step, what else can we do to fix the planet? Let's keep going. This is just a first step.
I think once you start to have a cognitive shift, then you keep shifting.
Oh, yeah.
And so I do think it starts with one's health. It's the thing that makes you say, gosh, I'm going to take the effort to kind of research another option because this isn't really working for me. And once you're willing to do that and you open your window, you realize, oh, there's more at play here. And once you get that shift, or else I get that bug, you kind of, once you know, you can't pretend you don't know. Once you open up your mind to that, you can't pretend that it's not out there. And when you know it, then you choose to do better. Because when you know better, you do better, in theory. I'll also say that for me, when I switched from meat and dairy to vegetables, like everyone else, I thought, oh my gosh, what am I gonna eat? What's gonna happen to me? But actually, when I switched over, my world became a very large place. And I realized on meat and dairy, my world had been a very small place.
Exactly, yeah.
Here, I thought I had so many options in meat and dairy, but I didn't. I went for the same ham and cheese sandwich. I went for the same 5-7 things. My vegetables were maybe 2, and one of them was potatoes. I mean, my world was a very small place. So here, I love what you're saying about the spice of life. So Milkadamia has chocolate milk creamer. Just for those of you who like sweets, I've been on it. You could even add, a holiday liqueur to that. It would be very good come Christmas time. But
it would.
This is a daytime show, so I'm not doing that now. But you've got a lot of products, and then of course all the other nut milks out there, and there's just a plethora of reasons to change. And then once you open the idea that, oh, this actually isn't the best for the land, it's obviously never has been the best for the animals. There's no smiling cow. Anyone over the age of 7 knows that there's no smiling cow. So it's just, and all it has for us is reward. It's like when you make this switch, you get the reward for your health, you get the reward for your planet, you feel better about your purchasing dollars. It's all up from there.
So what we like about planting trees, they do the opposite that cows do. Trees filter the water, they breathe out the sky. They clean up the land. Whereas when it was a dairy farm, the opposite was happening there.
Yes.
So the more trees we can plant, the more annuals, the more perennials, the less annuals. We're doing some good things, and it is happening slowly. We've just got to accelerate it. And I think
we as the planet, or we as in Milkadamia?
We as the populace.
As the populace.
As the populace. No one's coming to save us. The planet's in a bit of crisis. We need to act. We can't. If we do nothing good's going to come of that. We need to do something. And I think the most useless thing would be to sit back and wait for our leaders to recognise the issue and risk their political career to make changes. They're not going to do that. They care about power. Their pockets, not much else.
Yeah.
But what I see is with the consumers who have already demonstrated in dairy that globally, people independently with they're not being driven by an organisation, they're not being convinced by us. This started spontaneously, and it started on a multitude of different values, like a patchwork quilt of values coming together. And people have stepped away from dairy, which was a monopoly. Dairy, there was no other option. And even in the face of the fact that dairy had that, multi-generational scare campaign about calcium.
Right.
That is what kept driving sales, and they kept driving that story because of that reason.
Which is not accurate, folks.
Which
you
is
can
not
get
accurate
calcium
at all.
from lots of other things, broccoli, etc. Yeah.
And so to have in the face of that scare campaign, in the face of the fact that that has been so persistent and consistent,
they have so many subsidies.
People independently and just stepped away. As they step away and divert their funds away from dairy, we know that they're hurting because they're bleating like sheep. They're claiming all sorts of things and running around trying to restrict the words that we use, trying to do anything to get back to the good old days when dairy wasn't questioned and there were no other choices. But the fact that there are choices, and they're really good choices, it means that when we decide to go non-dairy or dairy, we're making a very definite statement ourselves. It means something one way or the other. And as people recognise that it means something one way or another, and they question, what am I doing? What am I supporting? I just love the fact that so many are stepping away. There's plenty more to come, of course. But that suggests that we are taking responsibility for this one thing first, but there will be those people are going to take responsibility for a lot of other things. We are part of the generation that wouldn't accept the clubbing of baby seals for fur.
Right.
We're part of the generation that said, look, animals trained for circuses and treated so cruelly we're not going to watch that for entertainment anymore. So Circus Soleil comes along. We're now saying we don't want to see large marine animals kept in captivity and made to jump through hoops for our entertainment. We don't want that. We refuse to accept blood diamonds. Values. Our values, the people's values, are starting to dictate what happens in industry and in commerce. And as the realisation deepens about what we need to do to look after our natural planet, it is those same people
values,
who have expressed those values and who have made each one an individual choice that they're not going to listen to other people's values, but they are going to listen to their own. And that's one of the things that we try and emphasise all the time. With Milkadamia, we make what we think is a beautiful macadamia milk. And we make it as beautiful as we can. We do beautiful packaging. We try to do it artfully. We don't like the idea that the packaging, when we first came into this, screamed, I am a poor cousin. I am nothing but an alternative.
Yes,
I'm not real. But we wanted to make ours, make it its own thing. Milkadamia, that's why we didn't call it macadamia milk. Milkadamia is its own thing. This exists because at this point in Earth's history, we need things like this to exist. And we don't need to cringe and think it's an alternative, because it's not. This is
actually better than.
Yeah. The other thing.
Is
which the poor alternative.
Is getting the hockey hip check out of here.
Here's the real deal.
Yes,
These plant-based, beautiful artisanal products. This is where the future is. And we're farmers. There's this other argument that we don't want to offend a farmer, or we're not interested in seeing farmers put out of work, and we're not. But we are farmers too. It's not like the only people who are farmers are running cattle.
That's right. Gosh, no. And to be clear, there's so many things I want to riff on what you said, but to be clear, there's nothing natural about a dairy farm. Now, there was something natural when someone had a farm and they had a cow or two. But when you're talking thousands of cows that are stuck in machines, that babies are ripped away, there is nothing natural about that process. I just want to riff on a couple of things you said. So you are so right. Historically, and I believe this will be the case for the future as well, governments don't make change. People make change. And then when people vote with their dollars and their voice, government says, oh my gosh, I better do that because that's where the money and the power is. But if you are waiting for other people to make changes, forget it. You make them yourself, and therein lies the beauty. I think, to your point, this is the time of the empowered consumer. Consumers are realizing that they have a set of values and that they no longer believe the advertising campaigns, and they see through that and they want to align their values with their purchases. And in doing so, they make a great statement about what they believe in. And I think they're even reminded of what they believe in, that maybe for a while they forgot. They just kind of bought things. But now they're saying, hey, enough is enough for myself, for my planet, for the kids, for my future. And in doing so, they make their voice heard loud and clear. And you don't have to stand on a street corner to do that. When you change your purchases, people get the message loud and clear, and dairy and meat run on very thin margins. I firmly believe personally they wouldn't even exist if they didn't have all the subsidies. And so every carton of Milkadamia makes a difference, and dairy, I think, could be going the wayside. It's hard to say. Coca-Cola, which distributes dairy right here, Fairlife in Chicago, it's headquartered. They just signed a big deal with China. So it's hard to say if dairy is really going down, but it's certainly not what consumers are more and more going towards.
Exactly. I think the idea that one industry is going up and another one down is not really the goal. The goal is, this is our planet. We say the earth is our turf, and we've got to protect our turf. It doesn't belong to governments. It doesn't belong to industry. It doesn't belong to corporations. It doesn't belong to the 1%. It belongs to the 100%. And if no one else is going to step up and protect it, then we have to.
We have to.
And that should be a value that we all hold, and that we're all happy to respond to, and that actually delights us. The same thing, I talked about regenerative farmers, how they are regenerated in their heart. They're regenerated. They become evangelists for that kind of life. They do, and for that kind of farming. But because it imbues what they do every day with new meaning. And when we recognize that when we go to the store, our food choices are actually value choices, that we can allow an industry to blossom or to wither on the vine, those that we believe deserve to wither on the vine. Now, our spend is supporting not just our families. It doesn't just keep our families going. The industries behind it, and then the agriculture system behind that, they also are dependent on our spend.
Sure.
And that happens whether we're doing it consciously or not. So unconsciously, we've been supporting things that we absolutely would not agree with if we could see the whole story. So, as we start to this period in history where we have so much information at our fingertips, where every one of us can find things out that may have been obscured prior, we now can speak to industry in the language they listen most attentively to. Their Cha-ching! Sales, sales, market share, the volumes, and we can make change much faster than any amount of talk fest or legislation or even protest or anything else can make. We can circumvent the whole thing. You've got all these lobbies, direct power to politicians, and they think that's the whole story, but they have forgotten, both the governments and the industry, that they actually serve us. In this little game of chess, we're the kings and the queens.
And they need a reminder sometimes.
Yes. Where we direct our funding, that's going to make all the difference. And if we are looking to take something mundane and make it exciting again, like shopping, grocery shopping, then this is a way to do that. And the last thing I'll say, I just kind of like the idea of this, that if that's going to make the difference, if it's where we direct our funds, if we direct our funds towards agricultural systems that are benefiting the earth rather than those who are just raping it, if that is what is going to happen through grocery purchases, then despite all the other changes that have happened culturally, there's actually still women who do most of the grocery shopping, right? So I kind of like the idea that Mother Nature is in the hands of mothers.
Yes.
it. I don't know how significant that is, but personally, I kind of trust that they will do the right thing once they recognise it. Well, for their family first of all, but everything else flows along behind that. Yeah.
Well, I always like to tell people you don't have to wait 4 years to vote. You vote 3 times a day.
Yeah.
You vote with your wallet at every meal. You make a stand. You don't have to be on the corner with the big sign. You don't have to be screaming. You don't even have to bother with your politician, although that helps. You can go ahead and call them too. They do want to hear from you. But you just go ahead and feed your family making the right choices for your personal values, which for 9.5 people on the planet out of 10 is not involving torturing the planet or animals. Most people don't want to do that. You just align your purchases with your values and you have a lot of power. But let's talk about what people can purchase very soon. It isn't just Milkadamia, it is...
our new butter.
Woo! Okay, so talk to us about butter.
So we've developed a Macadamia Butter, and we love this product.
I bet you do.
So,
surprise.
When you develop products and make them and put them out in the marketplace, you don't ever do one you don't like. You don't ever do one that you think is not great. Well, you shouldn't.
Right.
If you want to be successful, don't do that. We love all our products. Our passion for Milkadamia was just over the top. When it was just us making it, no one else knew about it. We were the only ones consuming it. We just loved that product. We loved our creamers too. They've been a fun project. They're so delicious.
So decadent, really.
They are
decadent creamer. Yeah, I'm going to start cooking with them, folks. So look for those recipes.
They take macadamias back to the great taste. They're all about taste,
the richness.
But for all that we've loved all these different products and we consume them ourselves before anyone else gets near them. We had a discussion the other day in the office, and we said none of us have ever had so much passion for a product as we have for this butter. We use it constantly. In fact, we there's always someone leaving the office to go and buy another loaf of bread because we just want to put the butter on it. It is a great butter. Not just advertising. This is delicious.
Does it taste like the nut? Or does it?
No, it tastes like butter.
It tastes like butter.
In fact, I think it tastes better than butter. It tastes. So there's this little interesting dilemma we have. Do we present something that tastes exactly like macadamias, or do we mimic the product we're looking to replace? You're always saying, what do we do? In the end, we've concluded that there's lots of recipes. Our culture has been built around milk and butter, to ask everyone to shift a long way from there and do something completely new, regardless of how good it tastes, is a big ask.
Yeah, and not quite yet.
Yeah, it'll happen.
Jump before you run. Yeah.
So we made a butter that tastes. We actually think we've succeeded in making something that tastes better than butter.
Okay, how can I get my hands on this butter?
It's being launched now.
Where should we go? Whole Foods? Where should we look for this?
Yeah, look in Whole Foods.
Okay. And about what's the time frame that we can do that?
Today.
What?
Yes.
And you didn't bring any with you? What's the point of interviewing you if we don't have butter? Okay, well, I'm going to Whole Foods, folks. I'll get it.
And it's obviously rolling out.
Yes.
Look anywhere, but
okay, look anywhere.
Yep.
Because Milkadamia can be found anywhere, the actual milk, right?
In most places, yes.
In most places.
Yeah.
So you're fully distributed across the U.S.?
We're in about 12,000 grocery stores and about 3,000 cafes.
Okay.
More to come.
Yes,
watch this space.
Yes, watch this space. Okay, that's awesome. Well, let's find a little bit about you super fast. I've got a bunch of questions that I always ask on this interview show. What is your favorite snack?
My favorite food, it's not so much a snack as I just love freshly squeezed orange juice.
Really?
My wife just asked me that a few weeks ago. She said, what is your absolute favorite thing? I said, freshly squeezed orange juice. Don't ask me why, I just like it.
Okay. Well, if you get good oranges, then really
and do it fresh,
Yes. Okay, what are we always going to find in your fridge besides fresh oranges?
Besides Milkadamia?
Besides Milkadamia.
Lots of contents for salads.
Yeah,
that's my wife loves to produce good salads, and and good tacos.
And good tacos.
Yeah.
Well, we all agree with her there. Okay, the next couple questions are a little bit longer, but they're more about you personally. You've had a long day, a bad day. Is there anything you say to yourself to kind of get you over the hurdle? For example, I always say to myself, nose to the grindstone, eyes to the sky.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yes. I decided a long time ago that in most circumstances you control your attitude.
And that's it.
And I have a series of things. I just say this is just a snapshot in time.
Oh, nice.
It's just one photo in a long film reel, and so you don't want to get too upset about that.
Shape.
Yeah. That is my main thing. It's just a snapshot in time. It's going to pass. Everything passes, and there's really good things ahead if we choose to believe there's good things ahead. And I don't mean that in a really weird spiritual sort of way, but it's just true. If you can look for the good, a lot of time we get involved in our problems, and our world gets smaller and smaller. We dip our head down, and we can only see the ground in front of our feet. And like you said, look up. There's a world of wonder. There really is a world of wonder, and there's a world of compellingly interesting stuff that gets you out of yourself. So is not to get tangled up in yourself. Not to trip over yourself, because there's so much more out there.
Yes, and we live in such interesting times, really. I think. What do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
I think the little piece of wisdom that I've gathered over the years is to embrace adversity. Adversity is your best friend. That drug of success, when everything is going well, that's when you're at your least creative and your most boring and dull. When you've got to confront some things, when you've got to overcome hurdles and find ways through, that's exciting. Success is like the answer. How boring are answers? They're conclusions. That's where you stop thinking.
Yeah, you want the questions.
You want questions. Yeah, you want. There's no wonder or amazement in success. The wonder and amazement is you find when you're seeking for those things. Yeah, so it's what I tell my poor grandkids. Just embrace adversity. It is.
At 5,
it actually is your best friend. Yeah.
How much adversity do
What
they
does that
have?
mean, Granddad?
That's right. Oh, it's too funny. Okay, what would you? And this might tie into what you just said, but what would you like to be known for?
I have a long answer. I probably shouldn't give it to you. I really don't want to be known specifically for anything. What I said earlier about us collectively, all of us taking responsibility for this stage of Earth's history, for what needs to happen next. To have any little role in making that happen would be great, but it's going to be everyone. It's not going to be one person. Also, if we don't do that, then the very concept of legacy is a bit of a waste of time.
Right. If it's a group effort, then there's no real individual legacy, I guess you're saying.
Exactly. And for Milkadamia, we have a set of things we tell each other all the time. We say, this is just so you're clear, you're on mission. And one of the things we say is we'll try and do everything right, but don't put ourselves on a pedestal. That's not the deal, because we're never going to get everything right. And if you put yourself on a pedestal, you're asking for trouble. But also, that's a distraction. We need to be encouraging everyone. Don't look at our values. Don't look at what we do. Don't buy Milkadamia because you like what we do on the farm and all those things. We hope you do like them, and we hope you do buy it, but not for that reason. Buy it because it's a match with your values and your desires for the planet and what you want to see happen next. So all of that says we have to get out of the way. We shouldn't be trying to be anything ourselves. We don't. The fact is, we don't have the smarts or the poise to represent something as big as what the planet needs now. We just don't have that. All we know is what we care about and what we want to save, and that's all any of us can know. We're the world experts at what we love, and I think that's what we've all got to recognise. there's a wonderful wonderful world for us to maintain and keep going. And the way that we can do that is maintain and keep going the things that you specifically love. That whether it is just your family or a park down the street, doesn't matter what it is, the things that we individually specifically love, that's what we should be trying to keep going. Saving the whole planet's too big.
It's too much. I'll just add to that, though, it means taking the time to figure out what you still love. Sometimes we're running around so much, we don't realize we're making purchases that don't align with our values because we haven't even had a second's moment to think about what we still value.
Yeah.
So it requires a little bit of just slowing down and looking at what we still value.
I think you said it before. Once you start doing that, it flows. And so the big step is to make one choice. You know, just make one deliberate choice to say, I am going to do this thing for this reason, and it's because it's my reason, and it's my thing for my reason. If once we do that, what we discovered in this process is that seems to open some doors and provide some fuel for the next step, and eventually you are trying to save the planet.
Yes, yes, right. It's, fair warning.
Eventually you get caught up in this, and also just the recognition that this is an all hands on deck moment, you know, and so your hands
matter and count.
They matter a lot, and every one of us, you know, if it comes down to food choices, we make thousands of those in our lifetime. Any one person really does make a difference, just
Huge.
that one. And so it's not lost, it doesn't just disappear. The other thing is you're going to find a brotherhood and sisterhood of like-minded people that may have been invisible to you before, and they are the most adventurous, the most passionate, the most exciting people on the planet. So why wouldn't you want to link up with them? Yeah,
I'll just add to that, the average person eats 215 pounds of meat a year. So you are making a huge difference for those animals, and you are making a huge difference for your intestines. Meat has no fiber. If you just make that one decision, for example. Okay, my very final question for you is, what are your predictions for the future? And that could be about plant-based milks, that could be about your grandkids, that could be about tomorrow, that could be about 10 years from now. It's kind of an open-ended question. What are your predictions for the future?
I think everything's a journey. You know, where we are right now is a snapshot in time. I think the whole plant-based movement, this is going to be a footnote in history, you know, if even that. I think what's coming next is much bigger and more dangerous and more exciting. I think there's going to be a global eco-rights movement of some kind that is going to provide the moral power that's we're all going to act on. I cannot believe that humanity will allow the diminishment of this planet. I can't believe that. The only thing that worries me is if we will act in time, which is why we say as much as we do. You know, we will certainly act. Humans are social creatures. We help each other. We don't. When we recognise there's an issue, you know, we might be quite indifferent, but you know, if we were on a cruise ship, for instance, and you know, we may only talk to a handful of people, but if that cruise ship starts to sink, we are offering our hand to everybody. You know, there's suddenly it's all of us. And right now it is all of us. And so we need to be offering our hand to everybody, and I'm so sure that we will. My only fear is that you know, we don't want to hit the tipping point and then start to act. You know, we need to be doing that now, and
we will.
I believe we already. What I love is that with so many already are. You know, it's already happening. It's not. We didn't invent this. We didn't create it. We didn't start it. We are just being dragged along by the wake of a lot of people starting to make important choices.
Yeah,
So
it's wonderful.
yeah.
These are exciting times, folks. So you want to look for milk. Take it from me. It is super rich and delicious. And I am going to start cooking with it. I'll send you my recipes. Super rich and delicious. Milkadamia. And they also have creamers and chocolate creamers. Butter is on the way. 12,000 stores across the U.S., give or take, 3,000 cafes. So just if you're not finding it for some reason at your Whole Foods, try the next one, and I'm sure you'll find it. I do want to say before I go, of course, thank you to Jim for being here with me. And of course, try Milkadamia, and hit up my website, ElysabethAlfano.com, for recipes. Some with Milkadamia will be coming soon, but I've got lots of recipes and interviews there. My last thing that I'll say is shout out to California Governor Gavin Newsom. He passed a ban on animals performing in circuses, statewide ban in California, a ban on the sale of fur, statewide ban in California, and a ban on the sale of exotic skins like caiman, hippo, lizards, banned for the state of California. Well done, you, sir, and all the people who made calls to him and used their voice. Like we were saying here today, use your voice, use your dollars. Everything you eat really does make a difference and makes a change, so you don't have to wait 4 years to vote. You can vote 3 times a day.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being with me. Go check out Milkadamia, and happy Columbus Day, everybody. Bye.